Yes, it's time to sell. Sell, sell. Prices are strong on these trucks at the moment. Used values are high for 2 and 3 year old V8 Scanias next generation.
Imagine paying tens of thousands of dollars for your dream truck, only to find out you've been duped. Scania, once a trusted brand, has shattered the very trust it built with truckers around the world. Price-fixing schemes, bribery scandals, and hidden fees have left thousands of loyal customers feeling betrayed and financially broken. This isn't just about bad business practices. It's a full-scale manipulation of hard-working people. What happens when a brand you believed in turns out to be a corporate monster?
Guys, I'm here at the Scania factory on the assembly line where the engines and transmissions come together. We found our 770 Scania V8 that is going in the R770 that's coming to the USA.
In 2017, Scania, one of the largest truck manufacturers in the world, was hit with a massive fine by the European Union. The company was fined a staggering €880 million, 0 cents, for its involvement in a cartel with other major truck manufacturers, including MAN, Daimler, and Volvo/Renault. This cartel had been in operation for a period of 14 years. From 1997 to 2011, and its effects were far-reaching, impacting not just the companies involved but also the customers they were meant to serve. The cartel's main purpose was to fix prices for trucks, effectively stifling competition in the market and inflating the prices for consumers. Over the years, truck buyers across Europe paid significantly more for their vehicles than they should have. The cartel members agreed on pricing strategies, controlling both the timing of price increases and the introduction of new models. This led to reduced competition, as smaller companies were unable to compete with the larger, more powerful manufacturers. For customers, especially businesses that relied on trucks for their operations, this meant that they were being charged inflated prices for vehicles that in many cases were not being improved at the pace they could have been. The financial penalty that Scania received was one of the largest ever imposed by the European Union for antitrust violations. While Scania admitted to being part of the cartel, it denied the extent of its involvement and made it clear that it intended to appeal the decision. Despite this, the fine remained, and it served as a clear message to the rest of the industry. The case was significant not just for the financial penalty, but also for the broader implications it had on the truck manufacturing industry. This scandal shook the trust of customers who had been loyal to the brand for years, and it raised serious questions about the ethical practices of large corporations within the automotive sector. The response from Scania was not particularly reassuring. The company claimed that it had made efforts to improve its practices in recent years, but many felt that the damage had already been done. For years, Scania had been seen as a trusted brand, known for its high-quality vehicles and strong reputation in the market. However, the cartel scandal shattered that image. Customers began to wonder if they had been misled all along, forced to pay inflated prices for trucks that were no better than those offered by other manufacturers. Many wondered how much they had really been overcharged over the years and whether they could ever trust the company again. It wasn't just the price fixing that caused outrage. There was also the issue of the cartel's manipulation of emission standards. Part of the agreement between the companies involved setting up a strategy to deal with the new, stricter emissions regulations that were being introduced in Europe. Instead of developing cleaner, more efficient technologies, these companies agreed to delay the introduction of new emission-reducing technologies in order to avoid the additional costs. This meant that for years, trucks continued to be sold that didn't meet the environmental standards that they should have. The public backlash against this disregard for environmental responsibility was swift, with many seeing it as yet another example of corporate greed and exploitation at the expense of the customer and the environment. As Scania faced the fallout from the cartel scandal, the company was left scrambling to repair its image. The truck industry as a whole began to look more closely at its practices, with many customers demanding more transparency and accountability from manufacturers. The issue was not just about the money, it was about trust, and that was something that Scania had lost. The company's involvement in the cartel was not an isolated incident, but part of a wider pattern of behavior that seemed to prioritize profits over ethical conduct. In the wake of the scandal, Scania began to make public efforts to distance itself from its past actions. The company started to promote itself as more transparent, focusing on its environmental initiatives and attempts to reduce its carbon footprint. They made claims that they were now dedicated to making the trucking industry more sustainable, but many were skeptical. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild, and Scania's critics were quick to point out that their actions spoke louder than their words. For many of the truckers who had relied on Scania's products for years, the news of the cartel was nothing short of devastating. Many felt betrayed, having spent large sums of money on trucks that were more expensive than they should have been, with little to show for it in terms of quality or innovation. They were also angry about the environmental impact of the company's practices, knowing that the delay in the introduction of cleaner technologies had contributed to air pollution and environmental damage. This scandal marked a turning point for Scania, as it was no longer simply about a financial fine, it was about the very essence of the company's reputation. For a brand that had built its success on trust, the cartel scandal exposed a darker side to its operations, and that was something that couldn't be easily swept under the rug. The company's long-standing relationships with customers, built on the foundation of reliability and quality, were now under intense scrutiny. Customers were no longer willing to take the company at its word, and they began to demand more accountability for the past actions. In response to the scandal, Scania faced financial consequences beyond just the fine. Sales began to drop, and dealers were forced to grapple with the fallout from the company's actions. The market for trucks became more competitive as customers began to look for alternatives to Scania, driven not only by the cartel scandal, but also by the broader trend of wanting more transparency from manufacturers. The damage to Scania's reputation was clear, and it was going to take more than a few corporate promises to undo the damage that had been done. While Scania's attempts to bounce back from the cartel scandal were ongoing, the damage was done, and the trust that had been so carefully built up over decades was now in tatters. The fine was a clear indication that Scania had been found guilty of serious wrongdoing, but the real question was whether the company could ever recover from the scandal, both in terms of its reputation and its customer base. For many truckers, the answer was no. They felt betrayed, exploited, and lied to, and the fallout from the cartel scandal would haunt Scania for years to come. In 2021, just as Scania was grappling with the fallout from its involvement in the European cartel scandal, the company found itself facing even more serious allegations, this time from its operations in India. This new controversy centered around accusations of bribery and corruption, casting yet another dark shadow over the Swedish truck manufacturer. The scandal not only deepened the mistrust that had already begun to build around Scania, but also highlighted significant ethical issues within the company's global operations. Reports emerged detailing that Scania had been involved in paying bribes to secure bus contracts in 7 Indian states. The payments were allegedly made over a 3-year period, from 2013 to 2016, and the bribes were used to influence decisions in the awarding of contracts for buses that Scania was hoping to sell to government-run transportation services. This kind of misconduct in emerging markets was not new for large corporations, but the scope and nature of the bribery scandal sent shockwaves through the Indian transport sector, raising questions about the integrity of both the company and the industry at large. One of the most troubling aspects of the scandal was the involvement of senior government officials. In one particularly notorious case, Scania was accused of providing a luxury bus to a government official's family for a wedding. This luxury vehicle, delivered at a time when the company was desperately trying to secure a foothold in the Indian market, seemed to be an effort to influence the official's decision regarding the awarding of contracts. Such actions highlighted the company's apparent disregard for ethical conduct in pursuit of market share, and it was clear that Scania's operations in India were deeply entangled with dubious practices that could no longer be ignored. The internal investigation that Scania launched in the wake of these allegations uncovered several instances of misrepresentation and corruption. It was revealed that Scania employees in India had engaged in a range of unethical behaviors, from providing false documentation to government officials to making covert payments designed to secure contracts. This was not just a matter of poor corporate governance. It was a systemic problem that had been allowed to fester within the company for years. The revelations were particularly damaging, given Scania's reputation as a premium manufacturer known for its quality and reliability. The idea that such a respected brand was involved in illegal activities was difficult for many to accept, especially for customers and employees who had long placed their trust in the company. As the details of the scandal began to surface, Scania made efforts to distance itself from the corrupt actions of its employees. The company stated that it was committed to complying with the highest standards of ethical behavior and that it would take all necessary steps to address the issue. However, the damage was already done. Scania's involvement in the bribery scandal in India raised serious questions about its operations not only in India but across the globe. It cast a long shadow over the company's credibility, which was already suffering from the earlier cartel scandal. The scandal also sparked a wider debate about the challenges that multinational corporations face when operating in emerging markets, where corruption and bribery are often more widespread than in developed economies. The public's reaction to the scandal was swift and unforgiving. In India, the revelations triggered widespread anger and frustration, particularly from the trucking community, which had been increasingly critical of Scania's pricing and business practices. The accusations of bribery added fuel to the fire, with many truckers feeling that the company had exploited their trust and their money for the sake of financial gain. This sense of betrayal was amplified by the fact that many of the affected truckers were already struggling with the fallout from the earlier cartel scandal. For many, this new scandal felt like the final straw, and they began to sever their ties with the brand. In the wake of the scandal, Scania's Indian operations were severely impacted. The company announced that it would be ceasing its sale of city buses in India, effectively pulling out of the market it had once seen as a key growth opportunity. Additionally, the company closed its manufacturing facility in India, further signaling its retreat from the market. This decision not only had a financial impact on Scania, but also severely damaged its reputation in a region where it had hoped to build a strong presence. The move also raised concerns about the company's future in other emerging markets where similar ethical issues could arise. The question was whether Scania could recover from the damage done to its reputation, both in India and on the global stage. The scandal also highlighted the risks that multinational companies face when they expand into new markets. India, with its large and growing economy, has been seen as an attractive market for foreign investment, particularly in the transport sector. However, it also presented challenges, including the prevalence of corruption and the complexities of navigating the country's regulatory environment. For Scania, the decision to engage in corrupt practices in order to secure contracts in India reflected a broader failure in its approach to doing business in the region. Instead of focusing on ethical, sustainable growth, Scania had resorted to underhanded tactics that ultimately backfired and led to its downfall in India. While Scania attempted to make amends, the damage was significant. The company faced legal consequences, with investigations into its practices underway in several jurisdictions. The Indian authorities were not the only ones scrutinizing Scania's actions. The company's global operations were also under intense scrutiny from regulators and customers alike. Scania's efforts to regain the trust of its customers were met with skepticism, and the company's reputation as a leading manufacturer of quality vehicles was severely tarnished. The bribery scandal in India only served to deepen the public's distrust of the company, and many customers began to look elsewhere for their trucking needs. The ethical implications of Scania's actions were far-reaching. For years, the company had built its reputation on providing reliable, high-quality trucks to customers around the world. However, the revelations of corruption and mismanagement undermined this image, leaving many questioning the true cost of doing business with Scania. The scandal also highlighted the importance of corporate responsibility and the need for companies to uphold the highest standards of ethics in all of their operations. In an increasingly globalized world, businesses can no longer afford to turn a blind eye to unethical behavior, especially when it involves corruption, bribery, and financial exploitation. For many in the trucking community, the scandal marked the end of their relationship with Scania. Truckers who had once trusted the brand now saw it as just another corporate giant willing to sacrifice ethical conduct for profit. As more details of the scandal emerged, it became clear that Scania's actions were part of a wider pattern of behavior that extended beyond India. The company's decision to prioritize market share over ethical behavior had backfired, and the trust that had once made Scania a household name was now in tatters. The fallout from the scandals that engulfed Scania has been swift and unforgiving, and the damage to the company's reputation has been profound. The combination of the European cartel scandal and the bribery allegations in India has led to a significant shift in the way customers particularly those in the trucking community, view the brand. Scania, once a symbol of quality and trust in the commercial vehicle sector, now finds itself on the defensive, attempting to restore its credibility while facing mounting backlash from both consumers and industry stakeholders. The repercussions have not only impacted Scania's bottom line, but have also altered the dynamics of the trucking industry itself, as riders and fleet operators begin to turn away from the brand in droves. The first and most immediate consequence of the scandals has been the erosion of trust. For many truckers and fleet owners, Scania represented a brand they could rely on for high-quality, durable trucks that would stand the test of time. This reputation was built on decades of engineering excellence and customer satisfaction. However, the cartel scandal, which exposed Scania's involvement in illegal price fixing with other major manufacturers, shattered that trust. Truck buyers had unknowingly paid inflated prices for vehicles, and the exposure of these practices left many feeling betrayed. The price-fixing cartel manipulated not only truck prices but also the market's overall fairness, preventing competitors from offering better or more affordable alternatives. It was clear that Scania, like the other companies involved, had chosen financial gain over the interests of its customers. The scandal in India added further fuel to the fire. Allegations of bribery in securing government contracts for buses revealed a darker side to Scania's operations. For a company that prided itself on its image of integrity and quality, these revelations were nothing short of a public relations disaster. The involvement of government officials in the bribery scheme added to the scandal's magnitude, creating a perception that Scania had willingly turned a blind eye to the ethical standards required in global business. The company's attempts to rectify the situation by halting its bus operations in India and closing its manufacturing facilities seemed like half-hearted attempts to cover up the damage rather than genuine efforts to restore trust. For many truckers, this combination of price manipulation and corrupt practices was a bridge too far. The impact of these scandals has been most keenly felt by those who had invested significant sums in Scania's products, only to find themselves caught in the middle of a series of unethical and illegal activities. In many cases, customers who had once been fiercely loyal to the brand are now choosing to walk away, seeking out alternatives that they believe offer better value, greater transparency, and a higher level of trust. Scania's previously unassailable position as a leader in the commercial vehicle market is now under intense scrutiny, and the question on many customers' minds is whether the company can ever regain its former stature. One of the most significant shifts to come out of the scandal is the rise of independent dealers and grassroots communities. As Scania's reputation has taken a hit, many truckers have started to turn their attention away from the corporate dealership model and towards smaller independent outlets that offer vehicles at more reasonable prices and with greater transparency. These independent dealerships, often family-owned or operated by smaller local businesses, have begun to capitalize on the growing distrust of large corporations like Scania. Many of these dealers are able to offer more competitive pricing without the hidden fees and markups that have become a hallmark of Scania's dealer network. As a result, customers are increasingly seeking out these alternatives, bypassing the traditional dealership model entirely in favor of a more personal and direct buying experience. At the same time, the growing dissatisfaction with Scania has led to the rise of online communities and peer-to-peer selling platforms where truckers can buy and sell vehicles directly without the need for a dealership intermediary. These communities, often built on social media platforms or dedicated online forums, have become a hub for truckers who are tired of dealing with large corporations and want to take more control over their buying and selling decisions. These platforms offer a level of transparency and trust that Scania and other major manufacturers have failed to provide in recent years. Truckers are able to share experiences, post reviews, and rate dealerships and manufacturers, giving them more power to make informed decisions. As these grassroots communities continue to grow, they pose a significant threat to traditional manufacturers like Scania, who are struggling to adapt to this new era of consumer empowerment. The growing demand for more ethical business practices and greater transparency in the truck manufacturing industry has led to an increased interest in brands that prioritize these values. For many truckers, Scania's involvement in price fixing and bribery has been a wake-up call, prompting them to seek out alternative manufacturers who they believe are more committed to ethical business practices. Smaller brands and independent manufacturers are beginning to gain traction, particularly those that offer trucks at more affordable prices or focus on environmental sustainability. These companies are positioning themselves as the antithesis of Scania, emphasizing their commitment to transparency, fair pricing, and customer-focused service. The rise of these alternatives has also been facilitated by the growth of technology in the trucking industry. Consumers now have access to apps and websites that allow them to compare prices, track financing offers, and view detailed information about the vehicles they are interested in. These tools have made it easier for truckers to shop around and make informed decisions without being subject to the high-pressure sales tactics and hidden fees that were once common in the industry. The ability to research and compare different manufacturers and dealers has empowered truckers to bypass the traditional dealership model entirely, which has put additional pressure on companies like Scania to adapt to the changing landscape. The pressure is also mounting on Scania's workforce, as dealership employees and salespeople are being forced to contend with the fallout from the scandals. Sales targets are being adjusted downward in an effort to stay afloat, but the constant pressure to meet quotas in a declining market is taking a toll on morale. There have been reports of burnout among staff, as employees are asked to continue selling a product that many of them no longer believe in. In some cases, dealerships have had to implement cost-cutting measures, including laying off workers or reducing their hours, in an attempt to stem the financial losses they have incurred. The internal culture within Scania's dealership network is under immense strain, and the company will need to address these challenges if it hopes to survive. Scania's struggles have not gone unnoticed by regulators. In response to the cartel scandal, several governments have introduced or are considering new legislation aimed at curbing the power of large truck manufacturers and increasing transparency in the industry. These regulations are designed to protect consumers from unfair pricing practices and ensure that companies like Scania are held accountable for their actions. As Scania continues to deal with the aftermath of the cartel scandal and the bribery allegations in India, it will need to navigate an increasingly complex regulatory environment while attempting to rebuild its brand.